After several failed attempts, I bring you a review of Metallica's 1996 album Load, the album that I grew up with early on, and the album that was my favorite album for the first half of my life. And so I'm going to be pretty biased about this album because of how much I love Metallica and how much of a Hetfield fanboy I am, but in mind with that, I will try to keep that the least biased I can be and try to give a good review with it. People won't like this album if they want a thrash album, if they want good drumming, and they want great soloing, because it's not a thrash album, because that's not Metallica what they were doing at the time. They just were doing what they wanted to, maybe not what they wanted to. Tough to say. That's one of the things why people don't like it, because they say it's Metallica's biggest sellout album, because there's influences of other things into it, like it's mostly hard rock and blues rock, and there's country influences, and there's all kinds of influences in it, so it's not good, apparently. If whether that's what they wanted to do or not will probably never be said. But it is what the album that they wrote at the time, whether it was label pressure or their own thinking, I still like it. I mean, and with the guitar solos and the drumming, Lars and Kirk have never been all that great, so you can't really expect all that much if you want a Metallica album. So I guess their best was in the 80s, and they just haven't been the same since, but that's to be expected with older musicians. And then devolving from a faster, more technical metal band to being more rock-oriented and less heavy. But other than that, I like the album a lot, and I even like everything that I've said before, but I understand why people wouldn't, so that will be taken into effect. But the things I liked about the album were solos and riffs, obviously, because I'm a huge Hetfield fanboy, and I always will be, and yeah, I mean, anything that James has ever been on, I've liked, so it's probably overly biased of me. And, well, Jason's bass playing, because Jason's great, and he really fit the band well. A comment about the vocals is probably the most Hetfield ever sang, along with Reload. It's him actually singing every note really clean, not really barking much like he did, and his voice just cleaning up everything. Sounds like he's actually singing, not yelling or anything. Clear notes, melodic vocals. Slower, but slower doesn't mean bad necessarily. And yeah, that's about all I have to say with the positive sides of the album. I recommend checking out the songs King Nothing, Waste My Hate, and Bleeding Me to get into the album, to get a feel for it, because those songs are what I feel like a lot of it sounds like, I guess. I mean, you should listen to the whole album, but to start, I'd say those songs, and then try listening to the whole thing if you want, but otherwise, those are my favorite songs on it, and I feel like you should listen to them if you want to listen to the album. If you want to dig the album the way I do, then you'll like those songs, otherwise, then you won't like it the same way I do, I guess. Yeah, overall, I give it a 7.5, 8 out of 10. I don't know. I really like the album. Being said, with my statements, I guess, I mean, the average person, metal fan, would probably give it somewhere between a 5 and a 6 out of 10. But that's not me either. I'd say what most people say is a 5 or a 6 is probably a 7 for me. Well, no. What most people say. I'm not very generous with my ratings. I like to keep them low, because I feel like high ratings only go with the greatest albums. So I think a 7.5 is actually a fairly high rating, and a 6 is still good. So most people, a 5 or a 6 would probably be a 4 for me. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about this album. This review is kind of lame because I kind of stupid, but